Is there a prompt? There are 6 emergency exits.
Hello, everybody. This is Rod, your captain speaking. We are currently 30,000 feet in the air, and we haven't even left the airport. We just lit the joint. Just kidding, a little pilot humor there. We like to have fun. Our destination today is Casablanca, Morocco. So everyone, sit back, fasten your seatbelts, and prepare for takeoff. We will be arriving in 6 hours and 58 minutes, so sit back and enjoy the ride. Okay.
Hell yeah, I like to travel. I like to travel, but I don't got a plan. Catch me rolling through your city, yeah. Got my toes in the sand.
I think I got some wanderlust, but I don't give a damn. Touching down on the asphalt, passport stamps, don't know in all lands.
7-footers, what is going on, y'all? You are listening to the dulcet tones of your boy, Jarod Hector. I might be doing this podcast solo today, which, for those of you loyal 7-footers fans, you know I do that quite regularly when Jenna's on assignment. She sent me a text. I'm stuck in the Bronx! Exclamation points. So we might hear from her. We might not. Either way, we'll be set and we'll be ready to go. I want to wish you all a Happy New Year. You know, I always wonder, like, when is the appropriate time to cut off the Happy New Year thing, right? That's like a big thing people always wonder. And my thing is, you cut it off when you cut it off, right? Like, you guys are our loyal listeners. We have not spoken to you since the calendar turned 2020. So let me be the last to wish you a Happy New Year. So much going on in the association, so we're going to jump right into it. And we're going to start off on a little bit of a down note. This happened a week ago. NBA Commissioner Emeritus David Stern died at the age of 77. He had a brain hemorrhage a few weeks ago and was hospitalized and had surgery immediately. And he died just as the calendar turned to the new year in 2020 last Wednesday. And, you know, in the time that has passed, a lot of people have been talking about his legacy, what he meant to the NBA, and all of that. And as with anyone, because, you know, we're all human, our thoughts about him and his legacy and all that is complicated, right? It's not a simple, smooth legacy. So first things first, rest in peace, Commissioner David Stern. Prayers to his family. So when Stern inherited this league back in the early 80s, I mean, it was in trouble, and it had a bad perception. The NBA Finals games, right? So its marquee event, the championships, were being played on tape delay, right? Like, the games would be recorded, and they'd send them to some, you know, whatever studio, whatever networks, and it would get played sometime around midnight on the East Coast. I mean, could you imagine today having a NBA game airing at 12 o'clock or 1 a.m. on the East Coast, right? Not live, but live on tape. So he was instrumental in turning the league into this behemoth of a product you see today. The globalization of the game was also a big thing from David Stern. He oversaw the Dream Team, right? Now, that was a FIBA thing, right? FIBA wanted to have international players, wanted to have professional American players play, and David Stern agreed with that and okayed it, and that's when we had arguably the greatest team ever assembled in the Dream Team, right? That 92 Olympics in Barcelona, where they literally dominated the world. And you could actually make the claim that that incredible Olympic team and what they did during that summer of 1992 is what helped really launch and turn all of these young international superstars we see today, Luka Doncic, et cetera, right? So Stern was a huge part of that, and basketball becoming the second most popular sport in the world behind soccer. And of course, in this country, you know, the second most popular league behind the NFL. And so David Stern was a big, big part of that. And he gets a lot of kudos and credit for really what is the hardest job, I think, of all of the four major sports, the hardest commissioner job. Because the NBA is the black league, right? Like, let's just call it what it is. While there are black players in the other sports and in high percentages in football, this is the league where, no, the faces of your franchise, the leaders, all the star players predominantly are black. And when you have to sell that to a consumer base that just on pure demographics and numbers is largely white, well, you could see how that could be a problem. And Stern was masterful in being able to put the NBA on Madison Avenue, so to speak, and sell basketball as we know it. But with that, of course, there were some challenges. And one of the things that was a part of David Stern's tenure was the Malice in the Palace. All right, that brawl during a game between the Pistons and Pacers, when members of the Indiana Pacers, were attacked by fans and then went into the stands to defend themselves, right? As a result of that, we had the dress code implemented and all these various things. And, you could argue that those policies that were implemented were along the lines of respectability politics and things we deem now as kowtowing and placating for white audiences. And, that's part of his legacy as well. And to be fair, I don't and didn't agree with the ruling of the time in terms of the dress code. I understand why he had to do it, though, because, like, right or wrong, the people who were making decisions at the time, and not much has changed since then, could not sell a league with players with tats and cornrows and, quote-unquote, the embrace of the hip-hop culture. Now we've sort of gone full 180 the other direction, and now it seems everything's all good. But that was a problem. And Stern, that wasn't the best way to navigate it, but, we are where we are. The other thing about Stern, too, is and again, I've never met Stern personally. I only have anecdotes from people I know, other media members who have spoken to him and who have had relationships with him. And the stories you hear are true, right? Ruling with an iron fist and, not suffering fools lightly, and someone who would often dress down subordinates in public settings, right? I mean, sort of bully tactics. Those things were there as well. So those are all part of his legacy too, as in addition to all the good things that he did. So these are things that we need to bring up and talk about. But the NBA as we see it today would not be the league that it is without, in large part, a lot of the work that David Stern did. And the league and its players and everything, they owe him a debt of gratitude. And the other thing about Stern is he might be the last. All owners or all commissioners work for the owners of the league in which they are the commissioner of. But when Stern was commissioner, he had a way of sort of, even though the owners were his bosses, he made it seem like he was the boss. And he would spar verbally and publicly with Mark Cuban, the Dallas Mavericks owner, fine him all the time. I mean, he was just that kind of person, right? So it's interesting to see, really that David Stern is a complex man, like, multi-layered, like we all are, right? So again, rest in peace, Commissioner Emeritus David Stern, dead at the age of 77. Moving on to on-the-court current news. Can we talk about Kevin Love and his temper tantrums? And I want to be clear about something. Kevin Love is not happy that he is on the Cleveland Cavaliers, and this is a team that a team that is going nowhere fast. He is on the back end of his career and would like to play for a contender and be somewhere where this team is going to win. I can respect and understand that. Kevin Love also, to be fair, signed a 4-year, $120 million extension. So you took the money, Kev. So this is, this is kind of what it is. You can argue and say, I didn't know the team was going to be this bad, what have you. It is what it is. As listeners of this pod know, Jenna and I are always by and large, proponents and are pro players. So I have no problem with Kevin wanting to not be in Cleveland. What I do have a problem with, however, is the way in which Kevin's demands to leave Cleveland are being covered by my fellow media colleagues, vis-a-vis how we talked about Anthony Davis last year and how we talked about Jimmy Butler. It's so fascinating to me how last year, when Anthony Davis, through his agent Rich Paul, made it be known that he wanted out of New Orleans and was not going to re-sign as a free agent, and he had certain destinations he wanted to go, how he was vilified as quitting on his team and not a team player, and all the code words that, again, my fellow media colleagues love to use when talking about certain types of players who do this. Mind you, Anthony Davis never got into a verbal argument or yelling match with the Pelicans GM at the time, Dell Demps, which Kevin Love did with Cavs GM Kobe Altman, saying, quote, "I don't care if you find me. I'm rich. I got lots of money." I'm just curious why we aren't talking about this in the same way. Anthony Davis never, during a game, threw a basketball, whipped it at one of his teammates when he was annoyed that he wasn't doing what he wanted him to do. Kevin Love did that. So, again, I just find it so fascinating the way in which my fellow media colleagues contort themselves into talking about one thing versus another. And I can't help but notice, what is the difference between a player like Anthony Davis and Kevin Love? I mean, you guys, I don't have to spell it out for you. You know what I'm saying here. And it's disingenuous, and we have to stop. These dog whistle words and these coded language that we use when we're talking about one player versus another, just stop. If you're anti-players being able to wield their power, then be anti all players wielding their power, right? Like, don't, particularly when the situations are similar. And let's be clear, Anthony Davis, again, didn't do any of the things Kevin Love has done. Now, Love did apologize and say he was behaving like a 13-year-old and not like a 31-year-old. And he said, quote, "If I'm here for 5 weeks or 5 more months," which, by the way, Kevin, you have 3 more years left on your deal. So even when he's apologizing for his behavior, he's still making it be known, I don't want to be here, right? It's me, but Anthony Davis wore a "That's All, Folks" shirt, and the internet and media went crazy and lost their mind with the pearl clutching and the hand wringing. Like, we need to stop this disingenuous behavior. Like, it's stupid and ridiculous. Just stop it, okay? You have players who don't like the situations and want to be somewhere, and they're wielding their power. That's it. End of story. And stop dancing or sugarcoating it or making it out to seem something different than what it is. Call them all. If you call a spade, call them all spades, right? Don't differentiate because of whatever biases you have. And they're pretty obvious here. So just wanted to put that out there. The other part about this story, too, is remember how Rich Paul, who, like it or not, I mean, Rich Paul's a powerful agent and becoming more powerful as time goes on. And listen, that upsets the status quo, right? I mean, agents, by and large, historically, are white men. Rich Paul ain't that, right? This is a black man in here. And not only is he the agent of the league's most powerful player, he's got quite a good roster of players. And it's funny how all the stories, again, when Davis wanted out, was about Rich Paul and what he's doing and how bad it is for the league. I don't hear the same stuff about Kevin Love's agent, Jeff Schwartz. Again, what's the difference between Jeff Schwartz and Rich Paul? You all do the math on that one. So that's where we are with that. We'll see what happens with Kevin Love. The other thing about that is that, I mean, you got 3 years, $90 million left on that deal for a player who, now, you all know, if you go back to the archives, I like as a player. Minnesota Kevin Love was one of my favorite players in the NBA. Now, he's a long way away from that, and I don't think he can be that again. And he's clearly a one-sided player. Nothing on defense, can only give you some shooting and spacing, maybe some rebounding on offense. So is it worth all of that for 3 years and $90 more million? We'll see if he's able to be moved by the trade deadline, which is about a month away. Speaking of the trade deadline, did you guys see all that noise about Kyle Kuzma being traded for Sacramento's Bogdan Bogdanovic. Listen, and this is no shade to Kyle Kuzma because I like Kuz, but the way in which we talk about Kuzma, you would think he's an all-star. Yo, let me tell you about Kyle Kuzma, right? Kyle Kuzma is one of these all cozy fam, all drip teams, right? He got the fresh dude, the fit's always on point. He's on Instagram. Like, his ubiquity makes us think he's better than he actually is. And, of course, part of that is playing in Los Angeles for the Lakers, right? You get sort of that L.A. Laker effect glow up on your game. I'm not saying he's not a good player, but we talking about him like he's an all-star. He ain't that, right? And if I'm Sacramento, no way I'm trading Bogdan for Kuzma. Are you kidding? Not even close, my friends. But that's something we got to think about, right? The Lakers are trying to figure out what kind of moves do they want to make. Do they have a move they need to make? I think they do. Listen, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, that 1-2, I mean, good luck stopping that pick and roll. They got that. But they're going to need, I think, one more piece to get over that hump. And whether that be, look, the rumors about Darren Collison coming, okay, I don't know if Darren Collison's the championship title swinger, but he would help because KCP, Rajon Rondo, those guys are playing way too many crucial minutes. And again, when you go into the playoffs, who are the guys, the 5, 6 guys, 7 that you can trust in crucial moments, right? I know Rondo's got playoff experience, but is he even that level and caliber of player anymore? They might need a little bit more spacing on the floor with some shooting. Another handler, ball handler. You know, so, and listen, Bogdanovic should be perfect. But again, from the Kings, no way. And I don't know, the Lakers have no other picks or assets that they can move to entice this deal for Sacramento because Bogdanovic is a restricted free agent. So they can match whatever offer he gets this summer. So if I'm the Kings, I'm sticking tight unless the Lakers somehow find a way to give me the moon and the stars. And to be fair, or to be clear, I should say, Jeannie Buss, Lakers owner, and Rob Pelinka, Lakers GM, they love Kyle Kuzma. So I don't think he's going anywhere. But we shall see what happens. So Bleacher Report's Rick Bucher had a story out about the load management situation in the NBA. And I thought the article was interesting for a variety of different reasons. The big quote and headline is, all we do is find reasons for guys not to work. Superstars and trainers have convinced fans that load management is vital to player health. But some coaches, execs, and players see in NBA we are not expected to go to work every day. And what I want to do is, and we've had this conversation on this podcast before about load management, but we need to have it again. Because what's happening in the ethos right now is disingenuous and it's lowbrow, right? The idea of load management is based upon medical science and research, right? And what is in the best interest and long term of the player. Now, do I believe that in some cases we go too far in one ways and too far in the other ways? Yes, as with everything, there's a happy medium. And the poster child, of course, for that is Kawhi Leonard. But here's why the Clippers forward Kawhi Leonard is not, people shouldn't be looking at it in that way. It is obvious and clear. Leonard is injured and is dealing with an injury that, for whatever reason, looks like it's chronic and will not get better until the day he stops playing basketball. Well, to that end, if he still wants to hoop, an 82-game regular season is not conducive for him to be able to hoop at the level he wants to, right? Which is why he played 60-something games last year with the Raptors, and he then was able to play all their playoff games. But if you watch closely, by the time they got to the finals, he was basically playing on one leg, limping, but played every game. So it's a trade-off. He decides, okay, if I play 82 regular season games, given what the current state of my knee and quad are, I cannot then be able to give you the same effort come playoff time. It's just physically not possible. So we maintain and use maintenance to deal with the knee and the quad over the course of the season so that he is as fresh as he can be, right? Because he's not going to be 100%, but as good as he can be ready for the playoffs. Now, the situation is in Bucher. This is in Bucher's article. You know, the NBA, like the NFL, like all these leagues are copycat leagues, right? One team does something, then everyone jumps on the bandwagon without actually investing the time and science and research and know-how into figuring out, okay, what exactly is right? Because you know who else load manages, but you don't think of it as load managing? The Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo. He averages 31 minutes a game. That's it. 31. A basketball game is 48 minutes. So that means 17 of those 48 minutes, he's not playing. Mike Budenholzer and their staff, this is what they do to have him as fresh as possible for the postseason. Every half, right? So the first 2 quarters of the first half and the last 2 quarters of the second half, he sits out a combined 8.5 minutes. Now, those 8.5 minutes may change based on where the Bucks are in the game, but he's playing 31, and that's it. Period. End of story. So that come playoff time, if you got to go the full 48, you're going the full 48. But you can't go 38, 40 plus minutes all regular season and then think you're going to be able to ramp it up again in the playoffs. The body has a finite amount of energy in it. It's not infinite. It's finite. When it's out, it's out. And rest and recovery are the key to being able to repeat the same actions at a high level. Any physiologist or person who has a working knowledge of physiology will tell you that. That is a fact and factual science. Rest and recovery is what is needed to be able to perform those same high-level athletic feats on a continued basis. Fact. Now, how much rest? Well, this is when individuals come into play in terms of what works for player A, what works for player B, what works for player C. It's all relative, right? In that same article, Damian Lillard said, look, I don't load manage during the season, but I also don't play a ton of pickup in the summertime. He's like, because I was doing that before and realized by the time I got to the season, I just wasn't feeling fresh. I wasn't hurt or anything, but too much pickup ball in the summer wasn't good. So I do a lot of skill work and some other different things to recover and rest my body. And that's the thing, right? These players, in order for them to continue, especially the elite guys, that's how they get better every year. They go to the gym and they add to their game, right? Well, again, if you're adding and working your game, you're not resting. You're putting more miles on your body. And so how are you doing those miles? And what are you doing? Are you playing more pickup? Are you doing individual skill work one-on-one in the gym? What's going on for you to put that stress on your body? Because ultimately, no matter who you are, your bodies and the ligaments and joints have a finite number of jumps, stretches, whatever you want to call in them. And when they're done, they're done. That's it. Over. And so teams have to be smart about the long-term health of their players if their ultimate goal is winning long-term. And so that's the idea. Now, you know, the detractors will say, well, the young guys, they got to get out there and play. And I agree. Young guys have to play and develop. Part of the issue with young guys are they're coming into the league. Let's say they play 1 year of college, and then by the time in a couple of years when high school players are eligible for the draft again, by the time these 18 and 19-year-old kids are entering the NBA, they've got the bodies of 25 and 26-year-olds because of the excess amounts of basketball they've already played up to this point, right? That's all that early specialization in AAU ball when they're 9, 10, 11, and 12. And look, that I think has gone way far in the wrong direction. Look, kids need to be able to play a multitude of different sports, in my opinion. If you look at some of the best athletes in the world, they were world-class at other things as well before they, you know, topped out in their primary sport. And that's important. And I think playing those other sports obviously limits the repetitive motion of singly playing one sport, whether it be basketball, tennis, golf, whatever, right? It's also maybe you're not as good at that other sport. It's giving you different types of skills, different type of mental makeup. There are all these added benefits to playing multiple sports in your youth before specializing at such a young age. So I think that's something we need to look at and think about as we're talking about this quote-unquote load management, right? It's It's not a bad thing. But this idea that all we do is find reasons for guys not to work, it's getting absurd. And the younger the league gets, which will happen even more when the draft rule changes, it's going to have an even greater negative impact. In what world are you not expected to go to work every day? Look, again, and the quote continues, back when it was Patrick Ewing standing in a garbage can of ice water, there were no days off. But now that you have physical therapists and acupuncturists and masseuses and deep tissue experts and dry dealers, now suddenly you have guys who can't go through an hour and a half of practice and play a game the next day. It's a joke. That's an unnamed source in Bucher's article, unnamed NBA executive. Look, that quote is a bit disingenuous, and the idea of Patrick Ewing, look, yeah, that was in the 1980s. We know more now. It's like this idea of when someone, when the polio vaccine was discovered. So what do you think? Because we decide that we can now cure you of polio, we should not use it? Because what? Like, come on. As time goes on and we learn more and we get smarter, we should use the knowledge that we have, right? It's better for everyone in the long term. I bet you if Ewing and those guys back in the day had all the technological advances that we have now, they may be feeling a lot better now. You ever see all these old NBA players walking around? Look at Kevin McHale walking around. It is brutal. Brutal. You mean to tell me if they didn't have the knowledge of what we have now, they wouldn't have used it back then? Get out of here. And part of it is in this culture that we have of masculinity, right? Yeah, you play all 82 games and you grind it out. You play 40-plus minutes and that's a sign of toughness. Sure, that 100% is a sign of toughness. But as I've said numerous times, go back and watch all those regular season games in the 80s and 90s. These dudes ain't playing hard 48 minutes. Stop it. They're not. Look it up. They're just not. So why, again, risk further injury by going through the motions when, okay, we've decided based on our plan, for this player, you're going to either sit out this game, or for this player, you're going to average 31 minutes. Regardless, we may tinker with when those 31 minutes are in a given game, but that's it. It's 31. End of story, right? There are all different ways you can do it, but we need to be clear and honest and have a real conversation about this and stop this back in my day, old man, get off my lawn nonsense about guys not being tough enough. Stop. You want players maximizing their ability for as long as possible. And if the knowledge of rest and recovery and science is going to help that, why not? Now, in order for this to work, there must be trust on both ends, right? Trust from the team, organization, and management and the medical and performance staff and the player that both sides are going to be honest and not try to take advantage of the system in either way, right? That's got to be clear. And look, that's on what kind of culture you have as an organization and what kind of individuals you draft to be part of your team. So that's my thought on that. We need to stop this disingenuous, lowbrow conversation about load management. Now, it is time for America's favorite segment, What's Up With? So I've got two What's Up Withs today. And the first one is, what is up with the Brooklyn Nets? So, as you all know, that's the team that I cover. I'm recording this on a Wednesday. They lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder last night in overtime. I was at that game, as I am at just about all the Nets games. Man, Chris Paul gave them the business. Late in that game between Chris Paul, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that's a tongue twister, they gave the Nets that work. And Chris is one of my favorite players in the league, the point guard. I mean, he just, man, he, on 3 consecutive possessions, Chris got the switch he wanted on the pick and roll. The Nets blitzed the pick and roll a couple times. Didn't matter. He turned the corner, got to his spot, rose up in the mid-range, hit the shots. I mean, clutch. Chris Paul is one of the great players we've ever seen in this league. Man, you guys go back and just do yourself a favor. Go just watch, a couple hours of Chris Paul tape and just watch how good this guy is. One of the great point guards we've ever seen in the history of this league. He was incredible last night. And, the Nets, that was their 7th straight loss. And this team is reeling right now. Worst stretch of basketball they've played all season. Defensively, they're okay. Offensively, they've been a nightmare since Christmas. The shots, 3-point shots aren't falling. And that's the thing, right? So the Nets are a heavy analytic-based team. Kenny and his team, they look at threes and shots at the rim, right? They're one of the top teams in shots at the rim, and they're in the top third of the league in terms of 3-point attempts. And we know that from numbers and analytics, those are the best shots because of the yield in terms of the high value. The problem for the Nets is that when the threes aren't falling, and in a particular game like that against the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have a superior rim protector in Steven Adams, well, what are you going to do? If your threes ain't falling and you can't score at the rim and you discourage the mid-range, that's kind of a problem. Now, in that game, Caris LeVert had 20 points. He had quite a few shots in the mid-range. Caris is one of the few players who will take shots in the mid-range. And it's not that the Nets don't want you shooting in the mid-range. It's just that how the offense flows, it tends to generate looks at the three-point line. But look, man, sometimes, like Chris Paul last night, it wasn't about no threes. Pick and roll, got the mismatch, got the hit spot, 17-foot, raised up, money. That is a shot that still matters in this league. Now, do I think players need to take it in droves? No, obviously not. But in situations, it is a shot that is valuable and necessary. Look, the Nets' best player, who is recovering from an Achilles tendon surgery, Kevin Durant, lives in the mid-range, right? And he is elite at shooting in the mid-range. Now, he can also score from three and at the rim as well, but a bulk of his shots come in the mid-range. So, and he said this numerous times, how do you know if guys can't shoot in the mid-range if they don't work on it? All guys do is work on threes. Well, if you don't work on your pull-up hezzy at 18 to 20 feet, how do you know you're not going to be good at it? And guess what? Late in the game when you need a bucket, that could be a shot that matters. As Chris Paul proved Tuesday night, doing it again, and again. And after the game, Kenny said, look, we blitzed the pick and roll, but Chris just hit tough shots. And, there's truth to that. But, I've talked to NBA players, and they all say the same thing. Look, when we get to our spots, it really isn't about the defense. The whole idea and concept of make or miss league is specifically about when we get to our spot on the floor, it doesn't matter what the defense is. If we get to our spot and rise up and get the shot, if we make or miss, it's about us. It ain't about the D, because that is a spot that we've gotten to, and we've worked on that shot hundreds of thousands, almost millions of times in our career through practice and game situations. So, again, tough times for the Nets right now. Luckily for them, Caris LeVert is back. He had thumb surgery in November, and he's on a minutes restriction right now. It ticked up a little bit Tuesday night, and it looks like it'll tick up again Friday, which is their next game at home against the Heat, which the Nets are coming up on a brutal schedule right now. They got the Heat on Friday, Hawks on Sunday, Jazz next Tuesday, Bucks next Friday or Saturday, Philly somewhere in there twice, the Lakers. Listen, the Hawks may be the only team in their next 8 that they can beat. And listen, if Trae Young gets hot, they may not be able to beat the Hawks either. So, it's a rough road coming up. So it's good that they have Caris LeVert coming back. And again, as his minutes restriction gets lifted, he'll be able to put in some work for them because they are going to need it. Spencer Dinwiddie's been playing like an all-star, but his efficiency has gone down of late, and that's primarily because he's having to carry too much of a load on offense and on defense. And when your efficiency starts to suffer, it's because your body's just tired. It's a lot. He's got to carry the offense, initiate everything, be the primary scorer, primary defender. It's a lot of work. So a much needed, much added reinforcements in Caris LeVert. The other big thing with the Nets right now, free agent point guard Kyrie Irving, who signed this summer, spoke to the media spoke to us last Saturday. And, it doesn't sound too good. Kyrie told us that he had a cortisone shot in his right shoulder on Christmas Eve. And the effects of that cortisone shot will be reevaluated over the next 4 to 8 weeks. Yeah, that's not sounding very good. And there was some discrepancy. The Nets were, and this is the Nets' prerogative, and they're a player-first organization, and they don't share timetables. So they kept saying it's day-to-day, it's day-to-day, it's day-to-day. But day-to-day turned into 20-something games in 2 months, right? Kyrie hasn't played since November. It's January. So there were us in the media, we wanted some answers, and we weren't getting them. And there were reports that came out and said Kyrie had bursitis. Kenny Atkinson denied that report. There were reports that, hey, Kyrie's considering surgery. Kenny also denied that. When Kyrie spoke to us last Saturday, he said that, in fact, yes, there is bursitis. He's visited a few specialists in Arizona, and surgery was discussed as an option. But he took the cortisone shot with the hopes of not having to have surgery and seeing how he can do. Right now, he says that lifting his shoulder above, lifting his arm above shoulder level hurts. So that means shooting's out, right? So based on all of that and what Kyrie Irving said to us at Media Day back in September, at the beginning of the season, he had talked about the importance of players and their long-term health and how upset he was and about how his new teammate Kevin Durant's situation and his BFF was handled in Golden State. And Kyrie said, I'm going to protect him and make sure he doesn't come back early or is rushed back. Now, Kevin Durant's his own man and do what he wants to do, and no one's suggesting that, he's coming back this year or anything like that. But those comments were telling. Because what that says to me is Kyrie's going to take that same approach with his health. And if there's any chance he can do any further damage to that shoulder, he is not playing this year. Right now, I have it at 50-50. He doesn't come back. Barring that the cortisone shot does wonders and he's feeling great in the next 4 weeks, I don't see it. And, and Kyrie said about the cortisone shot, you can't live off those, and that's not something he wants to do. So if I were a gambling man, again, I said 50-50, I might even lean 60-40, the chance that he does not come back. Either way you look at it, 4 to 8 weeks, right, from Christmas Eve, that puts us in February, end of February. Okay, so then he's got to get back on the court, practice. That's past All-Star. We're now in early March. I don't know, given where the team's going to be, what benefit there's going to be, right? Particularly if he can do further damage. Now, if he can't further damage the shoulder and the cortisone shot heals it or helps and he's, it's fine, he just needs to rest in the offseason, hey, he'll play because Kyrie is a competitor. Any of these thoughts out there about him not wanting to be out there with his teammates and him wanting to have a gap year and sit out, I don't buy that. Nothing I've heard from any of my sources around there suggests that. I just think that he is focused on his long-term health. And if there's anything that could cause damage, he's not going to do it. And listen, these guys, and I say it all the time, they trade on their bodies. And they got finite amount of time to do this stuff. And so if there's a chance that, they can do some long-term damage or hurt themselves further, I understand not wanting to risk that for fear of the long term. So that's the Nets right now. Again, they're in some trouble in terms of where they go from here. Luckily, again, as I mentioned, Karis LeVert is back. They're going to need him and Spencer Dinwiddie really to be the guys going forward and really step up and carry this team because, again, I doubt that we see Kyrie Irving this season. My next What's Up with, you guys all know, fan favorite or pod favorite, Michael Porter Jr. What is up with my guy? Had his career high last week, 25 points. He's now cracked the regular rotation for Mike Malone and the Denver Nuggets, and I'm really happy for this kid. He's a wonderful young man. We had a conversation, as you guys know, on our quick 2-minute segment a couple weeks ago, and I love his game. He's super talented, and I think that, Mike Malone said he's like the first guy off the bench, and if he can average 15 minutes, 18 minutes a game, give the Nuggets 11, 12, 13 points per with that second unit, that could be huge for them come playoff time, right? He's a young guy, I know, and, they're going to go through their growing pains and their ups and downs, but Denver's already a good team. Nikola Jokic has seemingly got himself back into shape and is starting to play like an all-NBA first-team center again. They're 25-11, the number 2 seed right now in the Western Conference. Hey, if we can get, if they can get Michael Porter Jr. to, and the challenge for all young players is consistency, right? But if he can do that and he can be that kind of player for them, he's got all the talent in the world. Man, look out for the Denver Nuggets. They're going to be a tough out come the playoffs. And yeah, people talking about, Jarod, what are you talking about? Playoffs. People, my thing about it ain't early anymore. By the end of this weekend coming up, most teams are going to be at 40 games already. 40. The NBA season is 82 games long. We're already halfway there. By All-Star break, 2/3 of the way there. This is the reality, people. So teams got to start figuring out and getting themselves together because it is go time. All right, we're bringing back a segment that you guys seem to enjoy a lot, and Jen and I are gonna be happy to bring it to you as much as we can going forward. It is 2 quick minutes and we have 2 quick minutes with Atlanta Hawks Kevin Huerter. Huerter is one of my favorite players in the league. He's averaging 16 points a game in his last 10, shooting 40% from 3. And I talked to him recently when the Hawks were in town to play the Brooklyn Nets.
So obviously, I know the injuries are a problem right now, but sort of taking a 30,000-foot view, what's the great thing about being on a team with the core guys being 22 and younger? So Trey, obviously John, yourself, DeAndre, and everybody. What's that like?
It's good. Obviously, we're still figuring out, like I said, how to play with each other, and everything's still new. It is tough. As players, your job is to win, and your job is to really perform on the court. And as a coaching staff, you're trying to do that. As a team, you're trying to do that. And so sometimes the big picture stuff, we don't really want to hear as much. We want to win. We want to win now. So we try to keep that in perspective a little bit. We're coming in every day just as frustrated with each loss, just trying to figure it out, put more ones in the board.
And what is it about, I know this is not your first year, but what is it about the NBA game that's just so different and so difficult for young players to sort of really grasp onto and get a hold of so quickly?
It's a physical grind, it's a mental grind. We played 2 days ago and we have another opportunity today. Some guys, especially the way our season's going, it's you play one game and you want to relax a little bit. And you're like, I want a couple days off just to decompress. You're like, we got shoot around tomorrow morning and then we're playing again the next day. And so that just over and over again. And all of a sudden you get to January and it feels like you've been playing for months and you haven't had a day off. That's the part that gets tough. And in my second, I'm still learning how to deal with it a little bit. But like I said, as a young team, and where a lot of guys are going through it, and it's easier when you're winning. But it's every day. It's still a mental grind too.
And I asked Lloyd about it pregame, about you specifically, and he said, the injury is just a tough thing because your training camp was a little bit slowed down and everything, and then the nagging injury. But it's slowly starting to come back. You're starting to feel it. How important is it rhythm-wise just to get consistency, not only from a minute standpoint, just like working up the sweat in an actual game versus shooting, and you guys don't practice that much because you're traveling all the time?
Yeah, it is huge, and it was one of those things. It was like we were trying to be careful and take practices just so I would be ready for games, and so you're not really getting as much of the rhythm in practice, and you're doing as much as you can, but it's like we got to get them out. Let's save your legs and try to have you ready for the game, and then you come in here and you're kind of basically going to games, not really had played a lot, and you're still dealing with your injuries, and so it's been frustrating. It's been different. I haven't really ever gone through this in my life. Never really had injuries. The things that are sore every day for me, I've never had to deal with in my life, and so it's definitely all new. And I felt like I haven't played a game yet where my body's been at 100%. Right. So I'm just trying to get back to that point, start to feel like myself a little more.
And for a young guy, oftentimes what you hear young guys saying when they come into the league it's not that they don't take their body seriously. They just don't understand how important it is. So now that you're going through the injuries, are you sort of seeing that differently and looking at it like, I mean, maybe not to LeBron's level, you spend $1 million a year on your body, but is that sort of how your brain's working? Like, look, I've got to really finely tune this thing because this is how I earn my money.
It is. It's almost one of those things. You come in the league and you know your body's important. You know you want to be healthy, but you don't truly know what it takes to keep your body that way. And it has. Like I've learned a lot. Even last year, that was the biggest takeaway I took from the year is wow, how long it is, and I got to take care of my body and do it now and get ready for the season. And so, I've changed my diet a couple times. I've eaten a lot cleaner than I was in college, even a lot cleaner than I was last year in my rookie year, and because that stuff does add up. And you can only play as long as your body holds up, and so you never want your body to be a reason to keep you off the court. So you got to figure out a way to take care of it.
All right, and last one. What's the kind of music you're listening to? What are you into right now? What's in those AirPods?
I'm listening to a lot of different things. The Roddy Ricch album came out, so I think everybody's still listening to that a little bit. I mix it up. I still got a little bit of Drake, a little bit of Future, stuff like that in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, man.
And that is the Hawks, Kevin Huerter. Great young man, really big fan of his, coming out of Maryland and in his second year down in Atlanta. With the youth movement going on down there with Trae Young, as I mentioned, we just heard from Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish, John Collins. The thing about youth, though, in the NBA, and you heard some of that in our conversation, learning how to win is tough, right? I mean, that's the thing about young guys. It's hard to win in this league, right? And that's the lumps that they're taking. And it's interesting because you're seeing that kind of not just in Atlanta, in Chicago, you're seeing the youth movement, right? In Cleveland, we talked about them. Yikes, what a disaster is going on down there. And New Orleans hoped to have the youth movement going, and obviously Zion hasn't played yet, so that's something, and we'll get to that shortly. And then you see it in Memphis, right? Memphis with John Morant and our guy Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. But they're winning games, right? Right now, getting close to that 8th seed in the Western Conference. So it's ups and downs when you're a young player in the NBA, and it takes a while for them to figure out how to get this thing all working. And go back and listen to that conversation in conjunction with what I said about load management and taking care of your body. I'm not saying Kevin needs to rest. My point is really about getting everyone to understand this is a physical thing that you're doing for a living, right? Playing NBA basketball, playing any professional sport. Your body is the vehicle by which you are able to earn your money. It is important that you do everything that you can to make sure that it is finely tuned and it is performing at its best so you can do this for as long as possible, right? I mean, that's the goal here. So anyway, shouts and my thanks again to Kevin Huerter of the Atlanta Hawks. So just some quick hits before we wrap up and get out of here. I mentioned Zion Williamson. So Zion's back on court. He's doing 5-on-5 drills. There's no specific date about when he'll come back. Obviously, David Griffin and the Pelicans are taking it slow, but man, this will be a jolt for the Pelicans if Zion can come back. And I think it'll happen sometime this month. That's what Griff had said, and some of the things I'm hearing from some of the folks down in and around New Orleans. And that'll be nice and give them a little bit of a jolt, as I said, because, things are tough for New Orleans. They're 12-25 towards the bottom of the Western Conference. And, this isn't what they had hoped, right? Everyone talked about when they signed all these guys and they made the draft picks and everything. I was like, this team might be a little frisky, and they've been anything but frisky. So I think Zion coming back will be a big help for them. So we're looking forward to that, and hopefully, Zion will have a long career, and we'll get to see some good things out of him. Victor Oladipo set to return January 29th for the Indiana Pacers, and this one I can't wait for. Vic's been out for over a year now, since last December. So in December 2018, not 2019. So it's been a while, and I'm excited for this. The Pacers have been playing well in his absence. They're 23-14, 8.5 games behind the Bucks. But as a number 6 seed right now, which more importantly, they won't catch the Bucks, but they're only 3 games back of the Miami Heat. And the interesting thing is, with Domantas Sabonis playing well, Malcolm Brogdon, TJ Warren, those guys have really been stepping up, and getting Jeremy Lamb. They've been doing extremely well. And now you're going to add back your all-star in Victor Oladipo. It's going to take some time for him to get acclimated again, get his win back, get back in playing shape, and get accustomed with the system and work off some rust. But boy, what an addition that is. You think about it, right? Like teams look about the trade deadline in different ways they can add people to their roster to be that jolt. Well, this is like a trade deadline roster, right? Except he didn't have to do anything. He's already here. So now he's healthy and back. And look, I'm firmly convinced with what's going on in Philly right now, with their up and down play, the injuries in Toronto. I know Miami's playing well, but they do rely on a lot of young people. Listen, Indiana could get this thing popping and go on a little run here and move themselves up into that 3-4 seed. And that'll be a hell of an accomplishment for them. Nick McMillan on the short list for Coach of the Year candidates, doing a hell of a job. So shout out, excited for Victor Oladipo's return January 29th. And some sad news, Detroit Pistons forward, All-NBA forward Blake Griffin underwent knee surgery, and there is no timetable on his return. The sad thing is here, folks, is I think we've seen the last of, like, peak Blake Griffin, right? I just think, again, we talk about injuries and quote-unquote load management and these players' bodies. Like, this is what they trade on. Your body's only got so many of these jumps in them. And every time you get cut into surgery, rise, or whatever, it takes something out of you. Not to mention, forget about all that, the years of playing ball on top of that, right? I mean, it just wears on you. So, obviously we wish the best for Blake. But the no timetable lets me believe that it's highly unlikely we see him the rest of this season. And then now Detroit becomes a seller at the trade deadline, right? What do they have to trade? I guess Andre Drummond, but is he a good stats, bad team guy? I don't know. Anyway, folks, thank you again for rocking with the 7-Footers. You know where to find us on Instagram, on Twitter, at 7-Footers Podcast. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at JS Hector, at Jenna Lemoncelli. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Please download, rate, review, subscribe. Shout out to Nick from CLNS Media. We got to get you on the pod, bud, to talk about Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. We got into a little bit of Twitter debate about that. I'll tell you guys about that maybe next episode. We got to get Nick down here, maybe the legend Bob Ryan to join him, talk about Magic and Bird. But anyway, we're back for the new year. Again, Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in. We will be back next week, and we're getting close to All-Star Game, folks. Can you believe it? Already halfway through the month of January. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.